This is the first video in my series on the corrupt family court of Nicollet County, Minnesota. This video focuses on the guardian ad litem. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the guardian ad litem is like the attorney who is supposed to be representing the best interests of your child. I demanded one in my divorce case because of emotional abuse and parental alienation. More on parental alienation syndrome in a future video. The guardian ad litem is a public official. I will simply refer to her as Miss Hansen. I had a short interview with Miss Hansen, and without much being asked, didn't speak to her again outside of a single phone call, which I will cover in a moment. When I received the guardian ad litem's report, I was troubled to see that Miss Hansen, in two sections of her report, had focused on an order for protection against me, but after reading the entire report, there was no mention whatsoever of the harassment restraining order against my wife. Although the order for protection stated that there were no allegations that amounted to abuse, even if believed, the harassment restraining order against my wife outlined physical abuse on numerous occasions with evidence. My wife actually admitted this abuse in court on October 27, 2021, when she admitted trying to push me, but accidentally striking me instead. I discovered that when the guardian ad litem interviewed my wife, she sat my daughter down with her abuser for the interview together, which is unheard of. Then I discovered the reason for the phone call I mentioned earlier. My wife had told the guardian ad litem in front of my child that I was faking autism to shirk my parental responsibility. Miss Hansen had called me asking me to prove I was autistic, but since she didn't tell me why she was asking, I was offended and initially refused, but quickly provided her with my medical records that very same day. The records I provided showed that I was legitimately diagnosed, and more than that, my wife was an integral part of that years-long diagnosis process. She told my daughter that her dad was faking disability because he didn't want to be her dad. Miss Hansen witnessed the very abuse that brought her to the case in the first place. However, what the guardian ad litem mentioned in her report was that I was hesitant to provide my medical records. She makes no mention whatsoever of the horrible, destructive lies she witnessed my wife tell my own child. The guardian ad litem makes a reference to my wife's alcohol abuse in the report, but tries to excuse it as being caused by gastric bypass surgery. The guardian ad litem made no effort to confirm my wife's gastric bypass as she did with my autism, and these incidents have no relation to gastric bypass. My wife has been hospitalized for severe alcohol abuse on 2 separate occasions. She's been drunk while at work and drunk several times in the middle of the day with family. I've had to have her get an MRI done because she wouldn't admit to being drunk at noon, and I thought she was having a stroke. This cost us thousands of dollars in medical bills. I've had to pull food out of her mouth when she was passed out on Ambien and alcohol. She gets violent when she's drunk, drinks 100 proof alcohol almost exclusively. Her children have had to help me carry her upstairs and have watched her resuscitated by paramedics on the living room floor with a blood alcohol content of 0.375. Despite all of this, listed as one of 4 areas of concern in the guardian ad litem's report is my alleged drinking. In other words, my wife says I drink a lot. For the record, I do not. Someone had to stay sober enough to render first aid, call 911, and watch the children. My wife once handed her 13-year-old son a whole box of Benadryl and told him to figure it out. He ended up in Children's Hospital tripping his balls off, screaming about spiders. He still has legitimate PTSD nearly a decade later. She used to give our 6-month-old infant daughter plastic bags to play with, and would tell her that there were magical fairies living in poisonous mushrooms, thinking that would keep her away. Which means area of concern number 2, of course, is my parenting style, because occasionally I talk politics. The accusations against me are that I slapped a wall with my palm and dented it 14 years ago, and yelled at a dog that snapped at me once. My wife has hit me repeatedly when angry, hit my child one time when angry, starts fights and won't let me leave. She's admitted to domestic abuse and has violated the restraining order against her. Which means area of concern number 3 would be my angry outbursts. So the guardian ad litem has recommended I attend anger management classes. My daughter was terrorized by her mother for months. She told her I hated her brothers, told her I was stalking them and waiting in the bushes. She had my daughter file affidavits against me that didn't even accuse me of anything. My daughter began suffering from suicidal ideation and anxiety, which began 4 months after she was taken from my home. It has continued without improvement to this day. For the 1 month I was allowed visitation, the 5 hours I was provided with my daughter was spent with her recovering from motion sickness after 3 hours in a car. The rest of the time she lives in a ghetto apartment in one of the worst cities in the country as far as crime, without any contact with her father or only living grandparents. And that brings us to the final area of concern, number 4, my daughter's mental health while visiting me. On October 1st, 2021, I kicked my wife out of the house for her well-documented history of domestic abuse, mental illness, emotional abuse of the children, alcohol abuse, parental alienation, attempted suicide, family abandonment, undermining my authority with my child, and telling vicious lies about me to win my children's favor. As a result of this, I've been recommended to undergo psychiatric evaluation because apparently the true danger is autism. The report of the guardian ad litem illustrates that my wife has replaced me as co-parent with her ex-husband, replaced her only living grandparents with her ex-mother-in-law, both of whom have parentally kidnapped her sons, and one of whom is a felon who has vandalized my truck and threatened me repeatedly. Ms. Hansen calls this my daughter's support structure. Ms. Hansen says things are going great with my daughter, even with that pesky suicidal ideation. No change is needed on the part of the mother. In fact, why don't we just go ahead and remove what little parental rights Dad still has left? I mean, they're just in the way after all. Since the report of the guardian ad litem, I have not heard a single word from my daughter. That was over 6 months ago. I have no visitation, my wife has full custody, the divorce is 15 months old already, without a trial or discovery schedule yet. I will be putting contact numbers for the guardian ad litem's office in the description below. It is your right to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. But no matter how you choose to contact any public official, never use threats of violence. Never allow them to silence your voice. But there will always be more of us than there are of them. I'm not alone, and neither are you.